Welcome to the Better Together podcast, where we look for ways we can work together to advance the gospel of Jesus Christ. Today we have with us Dr. Stephen Beck. He has a bachelor's degree from Vanderbilt University, so he's been extremely happy of late with what's happened with the Vanderbilt football team. He may not need to get excited about it. We don't know about next year, but anyway, big Vanderbilt alum and had a lot to cheer about this year. But he has degrees from the University of Virgin Islands and from Union University, where he has a specialist degree and a doctorate degree as well. He's a professor there at Welch College, but before that, he worked in the STEM disciplines. And so, Dr. Beck, you've had a lot of different experience today.
Yes. In fact, when I was looking at going to college, this is not the right reason to pick a major, but I didn't want to do English, and I knew that much. And so I chose Vanderbilt University because it was right down the road from Free Will Baptist Bible College. And so I was able to take Bible and missions classes while getting an electrical and computer engineering degree. And that biblical founding was real important to me, my family, been real important in my life. Met my wife there, which is also a big plus. So when I went to college, knew I wanted to study something technical, where Welch College was an important aspect to where I chose to do engineering.
Oh, this is great. So we're so glad you're able to be with us here today. And as we think about you're an example about what we want to talk about, the STEM disciplines. And I know many of our listeners have heard of STEM. Break it down for them. What does STEM stand for?
So, acronym for everything. So science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It's one of those fields where if you look at industry and you look at where there are needs for jobs, you look at growth, you look at what's shaping our economy, even how we think and communicate, and in large part is driven by science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And so those become crucial to everything around us.
And so often we talk about, hey, are you called into missions, or are you called to be a pastor? And we do believe, obviously, we want people to answer that call. We believe they are being called today and need to do that. We believe also that God has fearfully and wonderfully made everyone. And so some people are going to excel in science. And so as we think of it, and we often think about even as churches, we don't think of calling people or saying, you need to think about going into the STEM disciplines. Why should Christians think about going into science, technology, engineering, and mathematics?
It's a good question. Usually you hear reasons not to, and it usually starts off with, well, it's hard. And that part, in large part, is true. But I think it begins with what a Christian vocation looks like. And God does call everybody to fulfill the Great Commission, but that looks differently for different people. And so for me, back in the 90s, it was an opportunity to get into closed countries. So there's opportunities there when you have certain degrees and certain abilities that open doors. But I think it's important across the board when you're looking at what God's calling you to do. There are doors that open. There are opportunities that you have if you have a technology background, if you have a science background, that you wouldn't have otherwise. So instead of running away from something that is hard, I think vocationally, when we're looking at God's calling on our life, we're looking at the society around us and how we can impact that society. And the footprint that you can make in those fields is phenomenal here and around the world for the cause of Christ.
So I know our listeners are readers of the Bible. And as you go along and reading the Bible, you come across some guys named Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. I suspect they were some STEM kind of guys,
They were
right?
they were STEM kind of guys. In fact, I like it in Daniel 5, where Daniel is described as a problem solver.
Yes.
Those word problems that everybody sort of hates in math, those become really useful in real life if you're building a building, or if you want to design something that's not going to fall over, or a road, say in Daniel's day. He was a problem solver. He also solved mysteries, and riddles is what it describes. And I don't think that's, riddles like the chicken crossing the road or those sort of silly things. I think it's, hey, if we're going to have something that's going to be level, if we're going to have something something that's going to be safe for people to work in or be in. How do you do that? And describing that mathematically. Daniel and others are described as astrologers, and we kind of think that's like a horoscope type thing. But that's being able to look at the motion of planets. In our day, calculus invented by Leibniz and Newton, they're trying to describe the motion of planets.
Yes.
Deeply Christian people, theologians and respect, and they're looking at the universe and saying, we have a God that is a God of order, that is a God of reason. Let's find laws that God created that describe our universe. They didn't invent gravity. They discovered gravity. And so looking at people like Daniel and examples in the Old Testament, you see their description and you see that they're doing STEM in many ways. Everybody in the Bible is not doing STEM, but you see people who are able to describe the motion of planets. You can't do that without math. You can't do that without science. And so you see God using those specific abilities that problem solvers of their day had, and leveraging that to be influential in society and in many cases blessing the children of Israel and us.
And really what you're saying is history is kind of repeating itself a bit, isn't it?
Yes.
So they're in Babylon, they're being influential, and you're saying that if I can go and do some things, solve problems for other people, it creates opportunities for me to go places and maybe advance the gospel in those places as well.
It does. And even as you saw in Daniel's day, you had them solving problems that other people couldn't solve. When you think about, hey, I don't want to say calculus because it's hard. I encourage people to look at it differently, to say, well, yes, it is hard, but there are problems that you'll be able to solve that others won't. And as strange as it sounds, being able to be mathematically literate, scientifically literate for the glory of God. And I think that's what you see people like Daniel doing. You see them being able to use the skills that they have to further the gospel.
So in the U.S. history, this is kind of a unique time. I think this year we'll have more high school graduates than at any point in our history. However, it's called the Great Cliff or the enrollment cliff. All that's about to drop off because of the recession there in 2007, and the birth rates never recovered. It's interesting that we've got a lower number of high school graduates, which means probably a lower number of people going to college, at a time where, especially some of the states where we have the lowest number of church attendance and lowest number of churches, they drastically or desperately need STEM-type professionals. So talk to our listeners a little bit about maybe why if I'm so inclined to do STEM, why I might think about doing that, how the Lord might use that. You mentioned enclosed countries, but even in some places where they're often kind of antagonistic toward my Christian faith.
Sure, absolutely. In fact, if you look at wherever you go to look for job postings, I guarantee you, if you look everywhere that we have a home missions church, there are job needs for math teachers. There are job needs for nurses. There are job needs for engineers. And so if you're looking at areas to where there's this decline in population and a decline in workers, you're looking at open doors. And so denominationally, Great Commission wise, being able to go through those open doors. If you're a home missions pastor and you have the ability to write software, you can be a bivocational pastor in a small church that's maybe not able to financially support you, but you're able to bivocational, at least if you're starting off. And again, different cases everywhere. But if you have a STEM background, you're able to get employed in ways that you can make a living and at the same time be involved in a small congregation. If you're interested in going and working at a home missions work for our denomination, moving to Montana is a long move. I had family members just did it. But then finding jobs there becomes a whole lot easier if your background is in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And so I think it helps offset particularly areas where there are less workers and are greater needs in fewer churches. That gives us an open door as a denomination and as Christians to step into a place where there are needs and to be able to do that in a manner that's economically viable.
Oh, that's great. So you know someone, or maybe you are someone that's interested in STEM. You're saying be strategic about where you live and where you go, and go and partner along with another church. You may actually go to that particular site for that reason. If you have STEM training, you're saying, even as a bivocational pastor, you can support yourself. You can provide for the church because of the resources that will come your way, and thinking about using that. What a wonderful opportunity.
I worked in the Virgin Islands at a home missions church, and I can tell you right now, haven't checked the job postings, but there's a need for nurses in the Virgin Islands. If you want to go to the Virgin Islands and work as a nurse and also help out at a home missions work, there's a need there. And I would say that's probably true at every location that we have a home missions church. So if you're looking to be involved in a home missions work and being able to support that home missions work financially while you're working, STEM is a great way to be able to do that.
Now, I see you have your Welch College shirt on. I know you're a professor at Welch College, I think a dean, and maybe the educational dean there. So you know a little bit about how someone can grow in their Christian faith, develop in that manner, and it sounds like you did that as well when you were a student. Walk our listeners through how, because that's why so many people are sometimes worried. Oh no, they're going to learn about evolution, or they're going to question their Christian faith. How is it that I can actually have both?
Well, I think it's important, in going to college, staying grounded in your Christian faith. And as lots of studies have shown, that's where we're losing young people, is when they go off to a secular college and they lose that biblical grounding. They come from a solid Christian background and they go into an environment that, in essence, for all intents and purposes, is godless. Mm-hmm. And so when I went to college, being able to stay biblically based at a Christian college, at Welch College in my case, was super important for social reasons, spiritual reasons. And so, like, one of the things at Welch College that we have is we have a pathway with Vol State, which is a community college down the road, where you can get a degree in electrical engineering, associate's degree in electrical engineering, while at the same time getting a degree at Welch College or in computer science. So there's ways that you can get a technical degree and still be grounded in a Christian community of faith and learning. And I think that's very, very important for young people, and looking at a declining number of young people, but keeping them grounded in their faith. So it ties into the economics of STEM, but it more importantly ties into staying grounded in who they are and their belief system. And so our belief system, and to go out a little further, when you look at science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, these are founded on principles that were established by Christian men who said, we serve an orderly God, and the universe can be described by that. And so very often, if we separate those two, we end up in a world of relativity. Mm-hmm. And so being able to be biblically based while at the same time pursuing something that is technical or mathematical, I think is an important opportunity for young Christians.
So when you were a student, you're studying the Bible at what's now called Welch College, Free Will Baptist Bible College in those days. You're studying engineering and computer science down the road at Vanderbilt University. You're in this place of Christian faith and learning, this environment there at Welch College. So that helped you to grow as a believer, and then go on and be really a home missionary out there. You're saying that was the best of both worlds.
Yes.
And I hear you saying it's even better today.
Yes. There's more opportunities. I mean, in addition to partnerships that we have in place for technology, like with Vol State, online education didn't exist back when I went to college. The internet was just barely there. Only a few nerds knew about it. But there's online opportunities as well, to where you're looking at putting together a biblical basis of education and getting technology training in other places. We have partnership with Union University for nursing, with Belmont. So there are a lot more opportunities to that best of both worlds, as I see it, to where you're in a Christian environment, but at the same time pursuing things in a technological realm.
This is great. And so you're listening and you know a student, or maybe you are a student that would be interested in pursuing the STEM disciplines. You can contact Dr. Beck at Welch College. He'd be glad to talk with you. If my memory's correct, I believe I might have talked to you.
I believe you have,
point,
yes.
And helped our son in a great way. And if we're very strategic, and the Lord can really take us and use us in some wonderful ways in this area, can't He?
Yes, and I think one of the things that we don't like to talk about, certainly no pastors don't like to preach about it, it's money.
Yes.
And maybe if you're a televangelist, you like that, but most pastors, you don't want to stand up in the pulpit and talk about it because it seems such like a conflict of interest. But, one of the things to not shy away from, I believe, as a Christian is earning power. Mm-hmm. And if you're in a STEM field, you're earning 2, 3, 4 times what other disciplines earn. Now, that's not a biblical reason in and of itself to go be an engineer. But if you look at the teachings of Jesus, I think of Luke 14 when he's talking about building a tower. And this is couched in, hey, keep your finances where God's in priority. So if you've done that, Jesus is making a point about building a tower. Like you got to count the cost. You got to figure out how much is it going to cost to build the building. I read that and I read it like an engineer to where you got to know how to design a building. You've got to know how weight works. You've got to know how mass works. You got to know how gravity works. You got to know a little bit of math in order to be able to do that. But I think we need to approach finances the same way, especially as young people. Don't avoid a field because it's lucrative. In fact, flip it around and say, how can I use this for God's glory? If you're at a home missions church and you're making $200,000 a year in tithing, you're supporting missionaries, you're supporting your local church in ways that just aren't available if you're not in one of those fields. So I think one of the things that certainly needs to be looked at in the context of a Great Commission is what sort of jobs that are there and how those jobs can be glorifying to God, even if they are financially rewarding. I think it's not a curse if we're not worshiping that.
We shouldn't refuse to go into the field just because the field pays.
Yes.
It's just an example of how important this skill set is. Daniel was probably paid well.
Yes, probably so, yes.
So, it's like, and God can take whatever those resources are that you earn and He can use it. And we need it to start churches and so forth.
Yes.
So just to kind of close this out here a little bit, if you were thinking of what can we do, how are you fearfully and wonderfully made? Maybe a person looks at their grades, they look at their SAT, their GRE or ACT scores, right? And see if I'm strong in this area, don't discount it. God can definitely and has all through history used this.
Yes.
The Welch College is a place where you could do an associate's degree in these areas. You could study these things simultaneously. Think also strategically about where it is that you might go to church, where you could be used in a wonderful way. And I think we all know of a good church down in Huntsville, Alabama, that has become almost a magnet for engineers and STEM folks, where Paul Harrison pastors. And it's impacting the community, but it's also
fastest growing city in the state of Alabama, largest city in the state of Alabama now because of the aerospace industry.
How about that? Yeah. And able to do some great things with what the Lord has taken them and given them. Great examples. Well, we thank you for joining us today, Dr. Beck, and thank you, first of all, for how you let the Lord use you. You answered the call, really. You did STEM. You also studied the Bible simultaneously, went, did mission work, and now you could even say what you're doing with the students at Welch College is still part of that mission. So we appreciate you stopping by and seeing us today. Now, how can they reach you if they should like?
Sure. If you go to welch.edu, I'm there somewhere. My email address is sbeck@welch.edu. And I'll also put this out, and I've done this quite a bit, particularly for other young people who are trying to figure out, well, what's the difference between computer engineering and electrical engineering and mechanical engineering? Even if Welch isn't in your future and that's not what you're considering, I'm happy to answer those questions. When I came out of high school, I studied electrical and computer engineering because I knew one man in my church who was an electrical engineer. I had no idea what he did. I just knew I knew what kind of example he was in our church. That's why I studied electrical engineering originally, and that because I didn't want to take English. Point is that using those Christian resources, I'll be glad to help direct anybody in a technology way. Dr. Ian Hawkins, who's over the Arts and Science Department, also a Vandy alum, would be happy to help as well. So you can reach me by email. You can look at the Welch website, and I'll be happy to direct people any way I can.
So we want to encourage you to go to welch.edu, sbeck@welch.edu, and I can attest to that. We sat down with this man, and created, we had a young man that was really interested in STEM occupations. And so really just laid out a particular program of study, a whole different kind of program of study, if you will, to kind of reach or meet his particular needs. And so to be glad to talk to you about that, do what we can to help along as much as we can. So thank you, Dr. Beck.
Absolutely. And I believe that student's getting a PhD in mathematics as we speak.
I think so.
So, yes.
It works.
Yes.
It works. All this pays off while still growing in his faith with some good, godly people that are there and supporting him and helping him along. So it's a win-win, if you will.
Yes.
We want to also encourage you to do what you can to support Welch College. And so you've heard a little bit about Welch today as we've talked about STEM and the different degree programs that they have. So go to welch.edu, check out the degree programs that are there. We encourage you also to give. They have a offering for scholarships that's provided every year in February. Consider giving to that and giving to them regularly. And remember, every little thing you do really does count and it really does matter. Take this podcast, if you will, share it with a young student or a parent or a pastor, someone that would benefit from it. And remember, as we come together and as we work together, we truly are better together. Thank you for joining us today.